I can see this, you see, because some people, some men will have a malignant, narcissist, abusive father. And so their life is dedicated to trying to be the opposite. And so what they idealize and what they seek to become is an evasive, maneuvering to avoid, being just like dad. And so they can still have the narcissistic core, they still need supply, but they become very sensitive to the notions of fatherhood because they don't want to end up like their father. And so their behaviors with their children can be strongly modeled after an ideal, like a perfect dad. And then it's like you'll wonder, well, how did my daughter become narcissistic too or something? Well, because those perfect parents require the kids to be perfect kids, meaning that anything that the kid expresses that would be like a reaction to, say, an abusive behavior or punishment would be punished, because like narcissistic parents, even when trying to maintain and manage like a perfect ideal as a parent, and they could seem like perfect parents, they could actually provide a certain quality of life where they try to do all the right things, all the right activities, but unfortunately for the development of these types of personality disorders, I don't believe that it's just based on an environment that's maintained a particular way, but these things come from originating moments, that everything that you call traumatizing for yourself, even if you lived in a particular environment, there's always going to be an origination of identity. There's going to be a moment where you decided, I'm not good enough. And then you developed a personality. And so that's the confusing part, is that there are many narcissists that are generally good people. And say that again, that the way that they model themselves is good Americans, good people, good citizens. They can do all the things, PTA meetings, like they could be concerned parents, they could be attentive and strongly making a concerted effort to be good human beings, and they still have the pathology where the means through which they interpret everything is still going to be narcissistic. And in that extent, the children become an extension of that effort to prove themselves as good compared to a parent that they are modeling themselves against. And so in a sense, the narcissistic ideal parent is one that maintains a vitriolic relationship with an abusive parent and has dedicated themselves to proving themselves as better than that, as proving themselves not that. And so in many ways, narcissistic parents that are attempting to be the ideal model parents and citizens and participate that way will have a relationship to their parent where their effort is to be the opposite, where they don't want to end up like their dad or their mom. And so it's just about, well, you call it a mask, but it's like the best case scenario is you have a narcissist that modeled in concrete an effort and a will to be a good human being, and they're still going to have a lot of challenge, So I will tell you that there are a lot, of people. It's like sometimes, when you see what's happening in society where you might have lost friends, family members to radicalization, to conspiracy theory stuff, and then they become obsessive with that. Well, it just comes down to who they're modeling themselves after. That they have a variability, in terms of what they idealize. That young people could start watching misogynistic, alpha dating coaches and start to try to assimilate to that, when before they could have been trying to be really good people-pleasing narcissists, if you will. So, that's where it can be confusing. But what you'll notice with the most ideal narcissists is they will still have narcissistic injury. And the problem with them is that they can live and appear 95% good. 95% good. Generous, caring, have holidays, like try to do all the normal stuff that you'd expect out of an everyday human being. And the problem with them is that once a month or twice a week or twice a month or whatever the case may be, when they do experience injury, they will project all of that sentiment onto all the people around them. And they can do significant damage. They can betray you. They can try to hurt you. And sometimes those things where they really break and they do very bad things create a wall of shame and guilt where they can never acknowledge it. Whereas maybe smaller infractions, they can deal with that, meaning like they can come back remorseful. Because when they experience narcissistic injury from a result of not upkeeping their perfection as a father, as a whatever, they will be present to guilt and shame, and they will project that, and then they will actually, in a sense, have the semblance of remorse. And it will be authentic. It's just that it's coming from the narcissistic core. And so the emotional framework can still be narcissistic personality disorder, but there are best case scenario narcissists, high functioning, high intelligence, high in, cognitive empathy, a purposeful intent to not be abusive. They don't want to be abusive. It's just that the way in which they experience reality requires the projection of the narcissistic self, to where the way in which they understand their children, the way in which they understand people, becomes a cognitive limitation on their capacity to empathize with them. And so they project. And so when they deal with their children, they could be punitive by misinterpretation, by making presumptions about the child's trying to manipulate me, the child's doing this. They do that on purpose. And so you'll notice with narcissists is when in injury, they become a victim, and the feelings that they feel are attributable to the people outside of themselves or the circumstances of their life. And then they go about the process of dealing with that, punishing it or mitigating it in some manner. And it becomes sort of like a conscious battle, where their higher self is really desperate for trying to be good, but the emotional framework through which they generate their occurrence of the moment is in opposition. And so I think that there are people and there are narcissists that can have long-standing relationships. Some of them could be entirely faithful people. But I think generally you'll find that there can be families where you have two high-functioning, ideal narcissists that are attempting to be model citizens, a husband and a wife combo. And it can look on the surface like a normal relationship that just has eruptions, that will have these seemingly crazy blowouts. And the best thing is to never intervene on those, because they'll always re-idealize anyway. And then, it's a really interesting dynamic that in my life was normalized. That I've been around a lot of these people, a lot of these family dynamics. And for me, that kind of environment was normal. Like something where like my dad could act violent to me, and then I suppressed that at 15. And then the next day he's back at the house like it didn't happen. And so like relationships with ideal narcissists can follow these patterns of like, one becoming the victim to the other, and that other one ruined their life, and blah, 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 to back to a period of re-idealization where either one of them, if you talk to them, they're effusively in love with the other. Like, no, like we've been through so much together that this is just what it's like. And I think for the ideal narcissists, like they experience that this is normal. They'll make a case, like they'll actually sell you on the normal. Like, this is just what it's like you've never been in a relationship for 20 years or 15 years. And that's why I say, I really say this, that if you're a narcissist in recovery, the best thing you could do, it would be to find another self-aware narcissist, because in a way, it's like the damage is done. Like the originating trauma has been resolved by the genesis of narcissistic personality disorder. That to me, that is a state of healing because of permanence, because that is a way of compensating for the original trauma that may never be resolvable through any sort of psychotherapeutic means. That the chasm or the internal state was not developed or matured properly, and it may not be correctable. But there are best case scenarios. That there are, it's just that for normally intact people, you could have 90% good and then a big betrayal, life sabotage, rampaging event that can be something that's hard to reconcile later. And often the reconciliation would be your acquiescence to their perspective about what took place, which could be ongoingly damaging for you emotionally. So that's how I see it, because I've seen the best case scenario.